Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me on Facebook in the Sorcerers Guild. Today on Cryptid Tales and Magical Theory, we are going to be talking about ghost dogs, hellhounds, and other canine spirits, as well as a bit about canines themselves. Okay, so, dog spirits is one of those things that transcend cultures. There are stories of dog spirits in many different cultures. And not all of them are the same, but there are many that bear very interesting similarities. First, I want to talk about the canine itself and why it is so prevalent in every culture. Well, of course, the beginning of that is, it's one of the few things that every culture in the world shares. Dog has been with us so long that we don't know when the partnership between man and dog actually began. In fact, it may have been before we even actually fully became Homo sapiens. The most common theory, of course, is that we had already invented fire and we began giving dog treats and he began coming up to us, and then eventually he began helping us catch that food and find food, and we began a partnership and developed a sort of pact or friendship with each other. Some people have actually theorized that it may be a little bit more deep than that, and it may have gone the other way around. We have seen many cases when wolves have actually adopted young children that have been lost in the woods and that sort of thing. It's a very famous idea. Well, it has happened several times. And there's an argument that what's to say that is not what happened in the beginning. And then dog kept man around because he was useful for picking stuff up and carrying things around. And eventually, though, man figured out he could pick up a stick. And that kind of changed the power dynamic, if things got that way. Either way, somewhere along the line, man and dog became bonded to each other. And we formed a sort of pact or covenant to help each other find food and protect each other and take care of each other as if we were friends. That whole trope of dog being man's best friend. Of course, we have other animals that it may have come of their own will, like cat, and a few other ones that show up in our house whether we want them to or not. But most other of the domesticated animals in the world, we probably captured them the first time, like sheep, horses. Now, we don't eat horses, or do we eat sheep? We just get their wool off of them. Sometimes we eat them, but either way, these are creatures that we probably captured and then eventually persuaded to do what we wanted them to, as well as all the different animals that we keep domesticated and eat. They don't have the same kind of pact with us that dog has. And I feel that part of that pact is that we should not eat dog. The covenant that we have with them is that they will help us find food. The man who eats his dog has chosen to starve. And what I mean by that, or what we mean by that, is that once you eat your dog, well, your dog was the thing finding you food. Yeah, if you're in a survival situation, you can't find anything to eat, your dog is your greatest asset. So if you eat your dog, you have essentially long-term chosen to starve. Okay, so let me tell you then one quick ghost story about a ghost dog that I experienced myself. Okay, there is a local pond near here called Steed's Pond. And there are many different superstitions about Steed's Pond. Most of them are stories about other children that had drowned there. I heard these stories when I was a kid, most of them, about other children that had drowned there and were haunting the place, that sort of thing. One of the more silly stories, but one that still kind of sticks in my head about Steed's Pond, is supposedly they had snow gators there. Now, I live in Utah. At the moment, there are no such thing as snow gators, but we believed that we were out the school next to the pond, that there were these alligators that were just logs, and they could float along, and they'd look just like logs until they touched you, and then they would suddenly roll over, turn into an alligator, grab you, and pull you under the water. And so many of us believed that as a kid, that even today, when I'm at that pond and I see a log floating by, I still think a little bit about the snow gators and I'd rather the log didn't touch me. So that's kind of a fun little thing, the way things get stuck in your head like that. But anyways, so one night, I went there rather late at night, and as I walked up on the spot, it's kind of a clear spot, and there's a big bush in the middle, and I could see all the way around the bush when I sat down. So I sit down, I'm sitting there for a while, and I made a bit of a noise. I don't remember what it was, like I bumped into myself, coughed, who knows what I did, but I suddenly started hearing growling coming from the other side of that bush. It sounded like a very large, wounded, and angry or scared dog was now on the other side of that bush. Well, I was completely unsure how that dog had got there, but I was very concerned that I was about to get in a fight with the dog. So I sat there for a bit longer, and I tapped my leg to make a sound to get the dog to growl again so I could figure out where it was. And I did this a few times. Each time, the dog would growl, until I was very sure that somehow this very large and very angry dog had snuck up on the other side of this bush and was sitting there waiting for me. And I thought to myself, well, that dog is right there. There is no way out of this situation. You were going to get attacked by this dog. And so I tapped my leg a few more times and listened to the growl just to get myself ready. And I eventually decided, well, I'm going to have to stand up. And when I do, this dog is going to lunge for me. And so I very quickly jumped up and kind of leaped to the left, hoping to at least get a little bit of distance between myself and the dog and see if I could perhaps avoid being bit. But when I jumped up and leaped, I looked down at the bush, and well, just as when I had walked up, there wasn't actually anything there. And that was a very intense experience because a ghost was the farthest thing from my mind at the moment, honestly. I thought I was about to fight a very large, very angry dog. Anyways, spirit dogs, and most of these spirit dogs, a lot of them have something in common, and that is that they are all in some way associated with death. We have Hecate and her hounds and dogs, and the barking of a dog that is associated with her, along with the owls. We have Santissima Muerta, who has them exact same characteristics of the dogs and the owl. And then we have, of course, in Greek mythology, we have Cerberus, the three-headed hound that guards the gates to hell. We have this idea of hellhounds that's kind of a extra Christian mythology. I don't believe they're not mentioned anywhere in the Bible, but people certainly talk about hellhounds and demon dogs, that sort of thing. And all these things that are associated with death, I think they have a root. Just like how I've talked about grandmother in previous videos and how she is linked to death and takes on different forms in different cultures in some ways. I think that, well, these hounds, they are with her as well. And this is intended to guide us into the afterlife. This is something that is common in many different traditions. Much more common than Santissima Muerta and Hecate, which are, well, very identical from different parts of the world. We have these hounds and dogs that guide us into the afterlife. And this is true in some Asian traditions. There is some Native American traditions that believe a dog will guide you into the afterlife or sometimes guide you on your spirit journey. I took my own dog, Cootie, with me on one of my walkabouts for a very similar purpose. And in some of my visions, I have actually had her next to me. We'll be talking about her in a little bit, though, because there is some news there. And that's part of the reason we're doing this video tonight. But we will get to that. So, anyways, yes, the hounds are associated with the afterlife in many ways, in many different traditions, and is often this idea of them guiding us to our place in the afterlife, taking us through the crossroads, as it were, as will many other spirits, depending on who it is that we call, but those of us that perhaps are lucky enough may be guided through by a dog. Now, there are many, like I said, there are many traditions. In South America, we have the Mexica tradition, also known as the Aztecs, but properly they are known as the Mexica. And they, to this day, have a dog. I'm probably massacring this name. I think it's called Zotl or Zalotl. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it is the hairless dog that they have down there, and it is said to have a lot of very magical properties, and a lot of this is associated with healing and that sort of thing, and keeping away evil spirits. But also, they believed that when you died, it would be one of these types of dogs that guided you into the afterlife. And so this dog had a very special position amongst the Mexica. And it was guarded well and had its own priests that attended to it. There is also the jackal-headed god of Anubis. While jackal is not exactly a dog, it is a type of canine like a wolf. And like I said, it is a very similar idea. We have this in many different areas. And perhaps there could be some argument that the reason we associate dogs with death is because they are scavengers. But we don't associate vultures with death in the same way. Very few cultures have the idea of a vulture leading you into the afterlife, even though they are very right there connected to death. Now, I realize there are a couple, but it is not something that is propagated throughout the world in the same way. The dog is. These are dog, keys, and owls are associated with death in almost every culture where they are around. There is at least some association between these three things, and death and magic. Now, I realize, of course, the most traditional familiar is that of a cat, but there's also many dogs that were accused of the same thing, even up into the Middle Ages. Anyways, so I said we would talk about some particular individual spirit dogs. Of course, one of the most famous is the one that show up at graveyards. This is a very common occurrence where you will see dogs showing up at graveyards after their master has died. This isn't quite the same as a ghost dog, I realize, because this is when the person has died and the dog is simply coming up to their grave. And this happens a lot. It's a very sad thing when it happens, but often, even after the dog dies, it will still be seen at the grave. So that is why I'm talking about this in relation to ghost dogs, because ghost dogs are often seen in cemeteries, still returning to the grave of their lost master even after he died. So I suppose after they die, they can actually interact a bit more, hopefully. But either way, that is a very common myth that you hear throughout many different places. Is this idea of ghost dogs that show up in cemeteries to visit their masters. There is also a lot of rumors about many places that are haunted with dogs. I have known many people whose dogs return to them after they die. In fact, I can't think of a single dog I've had that didn't do that to some extent. They linger for a bit because they are reluctant to leave. And so, they stick with us for just a bit. Now, there is a little more I want to talk about on that, but I'm still not quite ready for it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the mythology with dogs. Another common myth that is actually, it is interesting that there are so many different variations of this same idea throughout many cultures, and that is the myth of the rift created between man and the rest of nature. And while I do believe that myth is an illusion, that rift is in many ways an illusion, it is talked about in many cultures this period where man came apart from the other animals. And in some of these myths he could talk to them, in some of these myths he could not. Depends on where you get this myth from. But either way, there is a rift formed between man and the rest of the animals. And just at the last moment, when Dog is over with the other animals, he realizes his friend man, human, will be all alone. And so he jumps across the rift onto the other side so that we will not be all by ourselves. And if there is any reality behind this myth, perhaps that is why it is so common for Dog to be the one to guide us through the other rift between the life and death, when he is the one that guides us in the other rift between us and the rest of our fellow earthlings. Anyways, I think I'm ready to talk about my dog now. So, a while back, just before I left for Canada, my dog Cootie passed away. Now, while she was alive, my dog was very good at astral projecting. Most of the time when I left her home, she would find a way to follow me anyways. In fact, this is so much the case that the few times I've had to leave her with other people, they say she is a very well-behaved dog. She just finds somewhere to be, lays down, and goes to sleep until I get back. And that's because she doesn't stay there. She wouldn't stay there. She would follow me home. And so, or she would follow me wherever I was going. And I would feel her in the car. I would feel her all over the place, even while she was still alive. And so, even before she passed away, I knew that she had a very strong presence in this way. Okay, so she passed away of kidney failure. It was quite traumatic for me, and I didn't handle it very well at first, but we do have to get over these things. I like to think that our time with dogs, no matter how short, leaves a bond and a mark that lasts an eternity. But one thing we do have to accept any time that we get a dog is that one day it is going to break our hearts, and that it is going to die before we do. But Cootie in particular, as I said, all dogs linger to some extent, but Cootie in particular had developed a very good skill at working on the astral while she was still alive. So I rather expected her to be a very powerful ghost. And so far, that has been the case. A few days after she died, her leash was in the back of my car, and she really loved riding in the car. She really always loved riding in the car. If it was up to her, we would have traveled everywhere all the time. Anyways, I opened up the hood, and the leash was back there, and for a few seconds, I just saw her there. The whole dog. Brindle fur, the eyes. She had pandas the last few years of her life, so her eyes had kind of darkened over. But in this, her eyes were the bright yellow again, and there she was just looking at me, ready to go for a walk. And so I took the leash out of the car, and I brought it into the house, and I put it with her bowl, and I had a shrine for her. I had a shrine for her that I had set up for quite a while, and I would feel her now and then, mostly here at the house, or when I was driving in the car. When I got home, I'd get that feeling of her greeting me still, and perhaps some of that is just habit, old memories still kicking in. But rather than reminding myself my dog was dead and pushing this away, I embraced it and brought it in. And I would reach my hand down and pet her and tell her she was a good girl still and that sort of thing. So I've been encouraging this ghost to remain to some extent. Now, there is a second step to this. While Cootie was alive, She was one of them dogs that would shed very heavily in the spring and in the fall when her new coats came in, because she's a healer Catahoula mix. She was such a pretty girl. She's in the background of a couple of my videos, especially the one where I am trying my hand at a potato golem, which we haven't reached the end of those yet. We are still working with the golems. It's just been put on the back burner for a bit here. Hopefully very soon we will have a combo potato gourd golem that I should be making before I head out. Oh, there will be more updates to come at the end of the video about what is going on in my life. So anyways, let's see, where were we? So, when Cootie shed, I would brush her fur and save it. Some of the time, I was saving it with the intention to make yarn, which I don't actually have the skill, knowledge, or tools to do so just yet. So, I'm not going to be using that fur to make yarn because I want to get to the next process. I will be learning to make yarn at some point, and hopefully we'll do some videos and perhaps learn together on how to make yarn and use it for string work. Because I think there's some very interesting possibilities there. But anyways, so on one occasion, as I was brushing her, I was thinking about her mortality and the fact that she was getting older and that she would be dying soon. And so that time, as I brushed her, I actually brushed her with the intention of creating a link with that particular bit of fur, so that when she died, I would be able to use it to encourage her ghost to remain with me as long as it wished and be able to interact with me. I collected that fur in particular, and I have some of it here, and I will be making a poppet with this fur out of my dog. So I'll make I don't have the I'm not quite ready for all of it yet, but I will be making a poppet of a dog with that fur, and then I will use the tag from her leash and attach that to the outside, and I will be using that to allow her an anchor point so that she can come and go as she pleases. Now, it is very important, if you are going to do this sort of thing, that you don't bind the dog to what you're creating, because this is not a thing of servitude. Yeah, dogs are not our servants, as much as we call them our dogs. If we are a proper dog friend, we shouldn't see them as property. They are our friend. They are our ally. They are our closest companions. And they should be seen as such, even in the afterlife. And so we don't bind them to the poppet. We make it in a way that they have an anchor point so they can come and go as they please. And they are actually going to be more powerful that way anyways. It is not wise to bind a spirit to something like that unless you are trying to get rid of it. If you want to work with a spirit, you want to make it so that it can come and go as it pleases still, so that it can still go out and do the things that you need it to do. Yeah? Okay. So, now that my cootie has passed, I will be making a puppet of her so that she can come and go as she pleases. And there will be updates on that in the future. And these hounds that walk with grandmother, well, they do guide us into the afterlife. But there's another part to them as well. And just like earlier in the video, you heard me say the one thing, probably the one time you're ever going to hear me say anything on my channel about what you should or should not be eating. As in, I said you shouldn't eat dogs. You're about to hear one more, and this should be the only videos where you see these, where you hear these types of things, and that is because I believe the hounds that follow grandmother also have something else to them, another purpose, a thing that travels throughout the full cosmic collective, the fuller reality. And it is perhaps a thing that helps keep that reality within balance. And I am about to read a poem about it. I've read this poem on this channel before, but I feel it is very appropriate for this moment. With her last breath, she whispered please, and so they come. Like the fingers that closed around her throat, their teeth are cruel and stronger than their prey. For every father's impotent rage, every last shriek that has yet to vent its motherly wrath, for every fallen victim that had the will, but not the strength to rise, there is an echo in time. Each time, another pulse, another twig snapping, another drum beating, another mouth growling, another voice howling. For every cruel deed that goes unpunished, every foul act that tortures the innocent, there are creatures waiting just beyond the shadows of death. Feral hounds driven by a rage that has become hunger. Ravenous tongues taste the air, hunting for the scent of evil's fear. Snapping jaws and angry teeth, talons raked with blood. There are no angels here, only vengeful monsters that feast upon the cruel. With her last breath, she asked for mercy, and death released her pain. After his last breath, he will wish for mercy, but they will come. These hounds, as they are called, are something that strips away karma. Yeah. If you develop a certain type of karma, which is the karma of those that are strong, harming the innocent, simply for pleasure, for cruelty. Anytime these things happen to the weak, it creates an echo, a thing that the hounds can hear. And the hounds, as we've discussed within these videos, are the guides between life and death in many cases. They are within that rift, that gap. And they can smell certain types of cruelty. And they will strip it away. And so, there is that. Now that we are at the end of the video, I did promise some updates about my own life. Now, we will get some more updates on what's going on with Cootie now that she has transferred into this new state. We have had a bit of practice with that sort of thing with some of the other stuff that I've done. So hopefully that goes well. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I actually have other news as well. Those of you that are in my soup group on Facebook, you already know, I am moving to Seattle. I'm going to be going up into Canada for a bit before that to memorize the ghost stories for the new place where I will be doing tours down there in Seattle. But then I will be moving to Seattle. And we will be continuing the channel there. So there might be a few interrupts in videos, as there is on this channel from time to time anyways, if we're being honest, yeah. But anyways, in the meantime, we are going to have a few videos on taking down an altar, especially one as complex as mine. As you'll recall, I have a bunch of salt crystals, salt crystal gardens, an entire stalactite. I've got a lot of stuff going on in this altar room. And I've taken some of it down already, but some of the big stuff, some of the major things, I'm going to do a video on taking it down and what I'm going to do with those salts now that they are no longer growing and it's time to harvest the garden. Okay, So, yes, I am moving to Seattle. I will be going there soon. I should be there by December. In the meantime, I'm going to be going up into Canada for a while again, and hopefully I'll be able to do, well, I will definitely do some videos while I'm there. Hopefully we'll get into some interesting stuff. We'll have some updates on Cootie. I'll be taking her thing with me throughout all of this process. For the moment, that's going to be it. Thank you once again for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take the opportunity to do so now. Until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.